Day 132, purpose. Would you please read the purpose for us, Kyle?
I will read data and other information from tables and graphs.
Relevance, Alexa. We're on page day 132. It's page 28. Success, Geo.
I will be able to state my thoughts on the issue and get back to it.
Warning, we're going to have a vocab quiz tomorrow. And there's our list. We've had all those words in our notes already. Classwork review. Just to go over what we've already talked about. UN says that global warming started in the 1970s. Oftentimes 76 is the magic number. Let's see here. Adrian. Number 2, would you please read that for us? Yep. Methane. Yep. Number 3, Jayla. Could you read number 3, please? One degree. Okay. Alexa, this word right here?
Yeah.
Methane. Number 4, positive feedbacks are changes that amplify warming by CO2. A little warming makes it even more and more warming. Pretty much everybody agrees that the CO2 itself is only going to raise it up by 1 degree. But they're still very, very concerned because that little change, they are worried about other positive things compounding that and making it warm up to 10 degrees maybe. In the extreme, most people think that it's going to be less than that, maybe 5 degrees, and that's still awful in their minds. Negative feedbacks are changes that fight back the warming of CO2. A little warming changes things to reduce other warming. So exactly which one's stronger, all the positive feedbacks put together or all the negative feedbacks put together? That is the source of a lot of the debates. Most people think that if the world warms by just another 2 degrees, it'll be okay. So when we do all these treaties and agreements between countries, the aim is to keep it below 2 degrees Celsius. Number 7. Surveys that ask specific questions of climate scientists show that 52% of them think that global warming is real and mostly caused by people. The 97% we hear about is either from a very small survey of 77 scientists or a survey of printed articles, not the real people, and other things like that. Over the last 130 years, sea levels have been rising. And that rising started before global warming in the 1970s. Glaciers started to melt in the 1800s. Global warming has not caused them to melt more quickly, at least according to the graphs that we've seen. Again, the melting of the glaciers started before the global warming of the 1970s. Number 11, Arctic sea ice has decreased more rapidly than computer models have predicted, and so a lot of people will point to that and say, see, we're right. There is evidence. Remember, both sides of the issue have evidence. If there's one thing I want you to learn from this whole packet, it's that. Both sides of the debate have their numbers and charts and graphs that support their side. It's just whose is better. I can't tell. Number 12. Antarctic ice has grown when computer models say that it should be shrinking. Computer models usually have made predictions that were 3 times hotter than actual observations turn out to be. We saw a graph of 102 different computer models, and the average was that it would rise 9 degrees over the last 100 years, and it's actually only been 3, something like that. Number 13, the biggest scientific journal in the world. That's the scientific journal called Science. It says computer models are not good at making predictions. Okay, and then let's watch a video about somebody who is in the middle. This is not a skeptic. This is not an alarmist. This is somebody who has a position in between. I believe that his official statement is, yes, global warming is a problem, but no, we really can't do anything to stop it. And so let's spend our money to adapt to it. Let's spend our money wisely in that regards. I think that's his position. Here we go.
Carbon emissions are rising, and faster than most scientists predicted. But many climate change alarmists seem to claim that all climate change is worse than expected. This ignores that much of the data is actually more encouraging than expected. Yes, Arctic sea ice is melting faster than models expected, but models also predicted that Antarctic sea ice would decrease, yet Antarctic sea ice is increasing. Yes, sea levels are rising, but the rise is not accelerating. If anything, two recent papers, one by Chinese scientists published in January 2014 and the other by U.S. scientists published in May 2013, have shown a small decline in the rate of sea level increase. We're often being told that we're seeing more and more droughts, but a study published in March 2014 in the journal Nature actually shows a decrease in the world's surface that has been afflicted by droughts since 1982. Facts like these are important because a one-sided focus on worst-case stories is a poor foundation for sound policies. Hurricanes are likewise used as an example of things getting worse. But look at the U.S., where we have the best statistics. If we adjust for population and wealth, hurricane damage during the period of 1900 to 2013 actually decreased slightly. At the UN Climate Conference in Lima, Peru, in December 2014, attendees were told that their country should cut carbon emissions to avoid future damage from storms like Typhoon Hagupit, which hit the Philippines during the conference, killing at least 21 people and forcing more than 1 million into shelters. Yet the trend for strong typhoons around the Philippines have actually declined since 1950, according to a study published in 2012 by the Journal of Climate. Again, we're told that all things are getting worse, but the facts don't support this. This does not mean global warming is not real or a problem, but the one-sided story of alarmism makes us lose focus. If we want to help the world's poor, who are the most threatened by natural disasters, it's less about cutting carbon emissions than it is about pulling them out of poverty. The best way to see this is to look at the world's deaths from natural disasters over time. In the Oxford University database for death rates from floods, extreme temperatures, droughts, and storms, the average in the first part of last century was more than 130 dead every year per million people. Since then, the death rates have dropped 97% to a new low in the 2010s of less than 4 per million. The dramatic decline is mostly due to economic developments that help nations withstand catastrophes. If you're rich like Florida, a major hurricane might cause plenty of damage to expensive buildings, but it kills few people and causes only a temporary dent in economic output. If a similar hurricane hits a poorer country like the Philippines or Guatemala, it kills many more people and can devastate the economy. So let's be clear, climate change is not worse than we thought. That doesn't mean it's not a reality or not a problem. It is. But the narrative that the world's climate is changing from bad to worse is unhelpful alarmism that prevent us from focusing on smart solutions. A well-meaning environmentalist might argue that because climate change is a reality, why not ramp up the rhetoric and focus on the bad news to make sure the public understands its importance? But that's exactly what we've done for the past 20 years. Yet, despite dramatic headlines, apocalyptic documentaries, and annual climate summits, carbon emissions continue to rise, especially in rapidly developing countries like India, China, and many African nations. Alarmism has encouraged the pursuit of a one-sided climate policy of trying to cut carbon emissions by subsidizing wind farms and solar panels. Yet today, according to the International Energy Agency, Only about 0.4% of global energy consumption comes from solar photovoltaics and windmills. And even with exceptionally optimistic assumptions about future deployment of wind and solar, the International Energy Agency expects that these energy forms will provide a minuscule 2.2% of the world's energy by 2040. In other words, for at least the next 2 decades, solar and wind energy are simply expensive, feel-good measures that will have an imperceptible climate impact. Instead, we should focus on investing in research and development of green energy to lower its costs, so everyone will want it, including China and India. We urgently need a more balanced climate conversation if we ought to make sensible choices and pick the right climate policy that can actually help fix climate change. I'm Bjorn Lomborg, president of the Copenhagen Consensus Center.
To subscribe to our YouTube channel, click here.
Okay, rounding the corner, almost done. Number 1, Arctic ice is decreasing, which is bad. However, Antarctic ice is increasing, which is the opposite of what computer models predicted. These are all the ideas from the video here, just to review the main ideas. Ocean levels are rising, but 2 papers recently showed the ocean levels are slowing in that rise, not getting worse and worse. Number 3, droughts are decreasing. Number 4, hurricanes are said to be getting worse, but the cost per person is actually getting smaller. We'll be seeing some data here today in our graphs that indicate that hurricanes are not getting worse. Number 5, does the speaker think that global warming is real? Yeah. But the main point that he was making, at least one of them, is that to help poor nations the most, we should not focus on cutting CO2 emissions, but rather to pull these people out of poverty. That way they can afford the better buildings that don't get destroyed in hurricanes and other events. They can afford to recover when the storms do blow. Number 7, 100 years ago, how many people died each year from these storms per million? 130, and now it's down to only 4. We are getting more and more capable of not only rebuilding after storms, but to build stuff better so that they don't get destroyed in big storms. Number 9, the reason for the improvement from 130 deaths down to 4 is economic development. So let's help everybody of the world to get better economics. And we've made great strides in the last 10 years. The amount of poverty in the world has really plummeted. It's down to single digits, which is fantastic. Okay, number 10. The other main point that the video wants to make is that not all news about global warming is that it's getting worse. What's the main way that people are trying to cut CO2? By renewable energy, wind farms, solar power. Unfortunately, right now that's very, very expensive. Not very efficient. Sporadic. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Cloudy weather, windy weather, etc. So right now it's only making less than 1%. But this guy on the video says, hey, let's spend our money not just building these inefficient ones, but let's do more research on getting better ones so that they don't need to be subsidized by the government and everybody will want them. It'll be better than coal. And then the natural market will take over.